I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting to order for today, Tuesday, January 18th. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Miss Wu,
Here.
Mr. Evans,
Here.
Miss Hersey,
Here.
Miss Colasetti, Miss Bishop,
Here.
Miss Wilkin,
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. I'd like to approval of the minutes for previous meeting. Are there any corrections? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve January 3rd, 2022 minutes.
A second.
Okay, thank you. Are there any discussion regarding the minutes? Okay, so Ms. Clark, could you please call the roll?
Okay, before I do, who seconded that?
Chandra.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Miss Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Miss Hersey,
Yes.
Miss Colasetti, is she here yet? No, okay. Miss Bishop,
Yes.
Miss Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
Are there any additions, subtractions, or changes to the agenda before I move on item 3? Yes, Mayor.
Yes, we would like to remove item 12 from the agenda. That's ordinance 2022-01-007, and that will be moved to the February 7th Committee of the Whole.
Okie dokie. Any other changes to the agenda? Okay. Vote on this? The changes? Okay, so moving on then, public input and presentations. Oh, I'm sorry, Chandra. You're muted, sweetie, so I can.
Never mind.
Oh, okay. All right, so moving on then to public input and presentations. If everyone that has anything to say, please raise their hands so that I can call on you. And I'll start off with C. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, this is Christopher Hansen. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I had sent a video over to be played for public input. Should that be done after I speak?
However you want to do it.
Okay, yeah, let's play it first then.
Okie doke. Is this the video?
It seems no audio is being played.
Okay.
There should be audio.
Is that it?
Well, you guys didn't play the audio of the video.
One moment.
Why don't you talk while we're waiting to get the video up?
Sure, yeah. Oh, I see the video just came back.
In local politics can no one in local politics can fail to be aware that James Corey Coker has repeatedly violated the public's trust, not least when he helped batter with two other Urbana police officers under his supervision an innocent Urbana resident, young woman of color, in the street on Good Friday 2020.
Stop resisting. Stop resisting right now. Stop resisting. Stop resisting. Stop resisting.
To the speaker who alleged that a member of the Urbana Police Department battered a member of the public, that is patently false. It's absolutely false.
Okay, so what you saw there was a member of the public indicating that your police officers had battered a member of the public and the mayor lying about it. The video clearly shows after Michael Cervantes tackled Alea Lewis to the ground and Officer Ruff punched her in the back of the head. Officer Coker then assisted in pinning her down so that Officer Ruff could knee her in the ribs. I would like to understand why the mayor thinks it's necessary to just openly lie about situations like this. I just don't understand it. And another thing that happened in that meeting is the mayor said that the city of Urbana was following various laws when a member of the public was alleging that the city was not following those laws. Any review of the mayor's statements over the past 2 years has indicated that when the mayor says with great enthusiasm that the city is following laws, that is exactly when the city is breaking laws. Take, for example, all of the Open Meetings Act violations committed by Mayor Marlin. Those are crimes. The Illinois Attorney General told you to stop doing that because you are committing crimes. The mayor was committing crimes against the people of Urbana. Think of all the FOIA violations. You guys remember when the mayor and her attorney were running a scheme to defraud residents of thousands of dollars in FOIA fees until the Illinois Attorney General told you to stop? You held presentations hours long on OMA and FOIA where the mayor and the city attorney said with great enthusiasm that the city was following all of the laws. In every one of those instances, you were wrong. And you were abusing the people of Urbana, and you were committing crimes against the people of Urbana. And I wish you would just stop lying to people. And when the mayor goes on lying, I know some of the city council members know when she's doing it. I just don't understand why you all sit there and let it happen. It makes it seem like you're condoning that type of behavior. I mean, you all have an opportunity to speak. If the mayor can speak out, to tell a lie, certainly any one of you can speak out to correct the lie. So I just don't understand what you're doing. You're blaming your constituents for bringing issues to your attention that the city is involved in misconduct. And residents of Urbana have been doing this for years, and you keep ignoring them. And in virtually every instance, it is later demonstrated that the city was breaking the law and abusing those people. So I don't know if you think that you're being diplomatic by just staying quiet. I don't know how. Maybe you think that people will just get tired and leave, which I guess they probably will. You're probably right about that. So maybe that's a smart tactic on your end. But I wish you'd consider the fact that some of you are coming up on the first year of your terms, and it isn't clear to me that you've done anything positive at all. It seems like things are just getting worse. It's more of the same. So I expect the city is going to see a lot more lawsuits going forward. I don't know why you guys never talk about all of the lawsuits that have already been filed against the city. Either you don't know about them or you don't care. Do you guys ever discuss the settlements that you issue for those lawsuits? Do you care? Does the mayor and her team just not tell you about them? So I don't know. I mean, I guess you can keep passing resolutions that are flowery in language and don't really do anything and just keep ignoring all of the substantive crimes you're committing against people and legal violations and fraudulent fees and concealment of records. But I wish you'd actually have an open conversation about it, because that would be so much more useful than staying quiet like you keep doing over and over and over. and like your predecessors or your predecessors did. I just don't get it. It's so disappointing. A lot of the people that I know that were enthusiastic or excited about a new city council coming into place, they just given up. They see nothing's going to happen here. So I don't know. I guess I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Okay. Okay. Next, Reverend Dr. Evelyn Underwood. Hello? I can't hear. Okay. Dr. Underwood?
Could we have a reminder what number it is to unmute from a phone? Does anyone remember? Star something to unmute from a phone,
I think it's *9.
if that's helpful at all. *9 to unmute from a phone.
Although I don't believe Dr. Underwood is on a phone right now.
All I see is that her mic isn't unmuted. I don't know if I have any. Are you there? There you go. I hear something.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, yes. I would like to speak a little later, please.
Okie doke.
Sharice, I think that's the last. There's one other person, so public input should be done soon.
Yeah. Sarah Nixon is next. And then Dr. Underwood, you'll be after Sarah Nixon.
Hello, City Council. This is Sarah Nixon. So I would like to note Mayor Diane Marlin's appalling public gaslighting last week at last week's City Council meeting. So gaslighting means to tell and or retell blatant, recognizable lies with such persistence that the people being lied to, excuse me, start to question the obvious truth. So yes, this would include the lies uttered by Mayor Marlin in response to my statement that James Corey Coker helped batter an innocent woman on the streets of Urbana. I'd like to move on and address my next point, which is a cluster of issues related to Urbana's recently formed crisis co-response team that I think should be looked at very carefully, and I hope City Council will keep these keep this forefront in your mind as we move forward. So this cluster involves racial bias training, gender bias training, trauma-informed training, and domestic violence-informed training. So those are 4 among many skills that all of the members of Urbana's crisis co-response team should be professionally schooled in, and with demonstrated real-life mastery and real-life success in applying those approaches. Adequate, appropriate, intimate partner balance training, that in itself is also racial bias informed, gender bias informed, and trauma informed, is something that we should be seeing across the board in the Urbana Police Department. All officers, not just every member of the CCRT, should be well schooled. And if they were, they would be versed in the following facts and their real life implications. So, for example, according to the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence, government data shows that African American women are 4 times more likely than white women to be murdered by an intimate partner. And among those homicides, guns as weapons are at the top of the list. The research points out that the phenomenon can be largely explained by the position, quote unquote, that Black women occupy on the socioeconomic scale. But all academic verbiage aside, the bottom line is that Black women are dying at a disproportionate rate at the hands of their partners. There's an issue with distrust of law enforcement can be a contributing factor to why we see such disproportionate rates of domestic violence homicides among Black women. There's a long list of reasons and additional barriers, special barriers, sort of extraordinary barriers that African American women and men face in domestic violence situations, all of which would be I think Urbana deserves a CCRT team that is well educated and trained in understanding and identifying features of such scenarios. And so I'm probably running out of time. What I would really like to ask is, I'm just about out of time. So I'll leave you with this question. What would a response to the young woman whom Lieutenant Coker helped batter on Friday 2020, a response that was domestic violence informed, racial bias informed, gender bias informed, and trauma informed, have looked like? It's not a rhetorical question. Thank you for your time.
Okay, next, Dr. Reverend Jacqueline Burnett Underwood.
Yes, ma'am. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are, ma'am.
Oh, great. I wanted to really kind of speak, after the council talk about the goals and all, but I guess we have to speak now. Is that it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So at this time, the only thing that I will speak about is what I've been speaking about all the time, and what I've been talking about, and it's looking everything that the city council, all that you're doing, and I know I was there when you talked about the goals and you had the young man come from out of town and all, and I listened, and I guess I don't want to judge, but I want to make sure that we look at everything, policies, goals, etc., through the lens of equity. That's very important for the city, our city, Urbana. Additionally, I kind of want to know, people are wondering when will we be looking at the funds? When can we apply for the funds? When will that be? Will that be after this discussion? I guess this will be the last of the discussion, so the public can know what the city is planning to do. Their goals for this year is, the goals are, etc., so that people can know how they can try to apply for some of those funds, so we can stop the violence, reduce the violence. So that's what I would like to say about that. Additionally, the infrastructure with the 250, I think it's $250,000 locally. When can people start putting in for those funds for the infrastructure? And I did hear the mayor so eloquently speak I think it was January 7th, about a lot of infrastructure ideas that they already have planned for the city. Will that come out of those funds, or will it come out of the funds, the R fund? I didn't hear that. So those are the kinds of things that are on my mind and on the minds of some of the citizens in Urbana. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Underwood. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? All right, next, moving on. Public input. Do we have staff reports? Any staff reports tonight?
Yes,
Okay, Mayor.
just a couple of things. One, I wanted to let the public know that according to Julie Pride at the CU Public Health District, there were 5 more COVID deaths reported today. Champaign County now has reached 250. The county as a whole remains the second lowest death rate from COVID in the state of Illinois, but it's 250 lives lost in our county so far. At the city of Urbana, we have processed 1,600 COVID leave hours in the pay period that ended just this past Friday. So that's a 2-week pay period. That's the week before was a little over 900 hours. So you're seeing the impact of the Omicron virus on our employees. It's estimates between employees who are still out that are either positive or quarantined for exposure or taking COVID leave to care for a family member. It affects probably estimated up to 20% of our workforce. So employees are out due to COVID related reasons in every single department. And this is directly affecting services, the timeliness of things, and it's driving up our overtime costs. As I've been on calls with other community organizations and local governments, and people pretty much agree that the Omicron variant is causing more disruption in terms of continuity of services and just impacting every facet of the community far more than the previous strains have. So we're hoping for this to peak soon, but you should know that it's significantly impacting City of Urbana employees. The announcement was made today, you may have already seen it, that households can receive up to 4 COVID test packets free, the rapid tests, and you just go to covidtest.gov. Very, very simple process to apply for them, and they'll be sent via the US mail. So it's covidtest.gov. And the question was about the ARPA discussion, the American Rescue Plan recovery funds. That will begin next week at the Urbana City Council meeting. There will be a substantial presentation by the Regional Planning Commission, who's working with us to administer the funds. And they'll be giving an overview of the funds and the allocation process. So that'll start next week and we'll go on after that. And as far as the equal infrastructure money that Dr. Underwood was referring to, that's $2 million. It's available for small scale neighborhood-based projects. There's an application, a link to the application that any resident or council member can fill out to recommend a particular project in your neighborhood. If you go to the city's homepage at urbanaillinois.us, you'll see the link to the equal application. And I encourage people to let us know what the needs are in your neighborhood. So we're looking at streetlights, sidewalks, ramps, crossings, traffic modifications, and that sort of thing. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other staff reports tonight?
Do we take questions on that?
I don't think so. I think it's just a staff report, right?
No, I can answer them afterwards if you want an email. Thanks.
Okay. So next, we're moving on to resolution number 2022-01-002R, resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement for animal control services. Is there somebody? And Carol's here. Thank you.
Sure. I'm joined this evening by Lieutenant Matt Bain and Darlene Kleppel, the county executive, and they're available to answer questions. I'm going to give an overview of this resolution. So for a number of years, the city of Urbana has had our own animal warden, our own animal control officer, and that person has been a non-sworn employee of the police department. The person who was filling that role left the position in July of last year, which gave us the opportunity to rethink how we wanted to provide animal control services. And we've taken that opportunity, and fortunately the county who provides animal control services for every other jurisdiction in Champaign County is willing to take us on as well. And there are a number of advantages associated with the city taking advantage of the county's services. And so just briefly, they're outlined in the memo, but the most significant advantage is the fact that we would basically double the amount of coverage that we have relative to what we were getting for less money than we were paying the animal control officer. So that is a significant benefit to the residents of Urbana. The full salary and related expenses for the animal control officer had been $87,000 and change. And the annualized cost of this intergovernmental agreement with the county will be a little over $57,000. It's a per capita amount. And this is one place where the lower census is helping us a tiny bit. And so that means that we'll have a lot better coverage, and there will also be the opportunity to have the individual backed up when they're not available, because we only had the one person. And so patrol officers had to fill in if our animal control officer wasn't available. And it'll also just be a much more seamless type of relationship, given that the animal control services will be provided by the county, and they also provide already our animal impoundment services. So that's the overview. You have a resolution that would authorize the mayor to enter into the intergovernmental agreement, which you have a copy of as well. And as I said, Lieutenant Matt Bain and Darlene Kleppel are here and available to answer any questions you have, as am I.
Does anyone have any questions? Mary Alice?
I think James had his virtual hand up before me.
Okay, James.
Yeah, I'm curious, how much of the control officer's time was spent on animal control prior to their departing? I mean, what was the breakdown percentage-wise of animal control duties and other duties?
I'm going to ask Matt to answer that, please.
Okay, good evening. I don't have specific numbers in front of me, but the other duties as far as animal control that occurred with the animal control officer position were mainly 5 additional tasks. One of those was to assist the evidence technician. Another was they were in charge of collecting bicycles that were lost or found throughout the community. They were in charge of a program called Risk Watch, which is going into primarily the elementary schools and putting on some safety lessons and things like that. They were in charge of coordinating neighborhood watch programs, basically setting up an officer with a certain neighborhood group in a neighborhood watch. And they were the backup to our Scantron fingerprinting service. Number wise, it looks like I had Melissa run some general numbers for us. It looks like the animal control officer over the past 4 years or so was responding to between, we have a high of 591 calls in 2019 to a low of 498 calls in 2018. So if you wanted a percentage, I would probably, off the top of my head, say about 85 or 90% of their time was actual animal control, responding to calls, follow up, dealing with vets, dealing with the animal control facility, and the other 10 to 15% doing the other tasks.
Okay, because by my simple math, we're saving about 35% with this deal, except for whatever we have to do to fill that gap of other duties. So it sounds like a really good deal. I think when we talked about the agreement being out of date in the summer, this was something I hope we would look at. So sounds good to me.
Okay.
Mary Alice?
Yeah, along those veins, those 5 different areas, do we have other staff members who have been assigned those items?
Yes, 4 of them have been assigned since Amy Anderson left in July. The only one that hasn't been permanently reassigned is backing up the evidence technician. We've kind of been filling that in with officers who had been on light duty. So she hasn't been getting much help. We can possibly look into the position of hiring someone part-time in the future to help out with those tasks. But that would be the only one that hasn't been permanently reassigned.
And so you were able to reassign those duties without additional staff, it sounds to me.
Yes, within the police department.
Okay, and then my second question is, so this person has not been in the position for the past 6 months. Does that mean that, what has Urbana been doing?
Patrol officers have been handling it just like they would when on the off times. So they've been picking up the slack.
So patrol officers have been picking up animals and taking them to the county?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, are there any more questions? Get Grace.
Thanks, Sharice. Thank you guys for the presentation. I have definitely had some of these experiences and have had some positive experiences with our past officer and really appreciate that when it's really important when you come across a stray animal in need. So I appreciate those services, and I was hoping to clarify a little bit of this and recap. I see a lot of positives, that it's a cost savings, that it looks like all the other cities in the county are also using the county services, and that there will be a full-time equivalent of 40 hours a week dedicated for Urbana, even though it won't be one whole person. Is that right so far?
Yes.
Thank you. So I see those as positives. I love to see the reporting and inspection options in there, and would love to see that carried out, just out of curiosity, if there's like an annual report or inspection, just for some accountability and oversight in the whole process, since we're outsourcing. And I think it's really important to make it clear to the public who to call when during night and day hours. So I didn't know if there was some clarification we could have here on where to direct the public if we move forward with this, and even if not, for like nighttime hours and things.
Matt, you want to take that one?
Yeah, that's not going to change at all. They can, people can either call the Urbana Police Department and be transferred to METCAD. METCAD was the one that primarily dispatched our animal control officer to various calls. So none of that's going to change.
So then it would be the county animal control officer, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., right?
Right.
And then after 7 p.m.
What happens at 7 p.m.?
After 7 p.m. during the nighttime.
then it goes back to patrol.
So saying then patrol officers would come and transport the animals to the county.
Correct.
Okay. Good to know. Great. All right. Thank you.
Any more questions for our presenters? Okay, can I entertain a motion regarding this resolution? Grace?
I'll do it.
Well, I just saw your square come up.
Oh.
So it's like got this little,
I thought you just read my mind. I was gonna say I'll pull the trigger if nobody else is.
Okay. I just saw this. I thought you were trying to say something because you were muted. So that's why. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll move. I'll move to City Council with a recommendation for approval. I think I'll go consent agenda for resolution number 2022-01-002R, resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement for animal control services.
Can I get a second?
A second.
I
think James waved though.
James waved his hand. James, are you seconding?
I am, sorry.
Okay, seconding. Okay. It's been moved by Grace and seconded by James. Is there any discussion? Mary Alice, would you please take the...
Sure, I'll take the chair and the chair recognizes Sharice.
Thank you. Matt, I just wanted to say that I do miss Amy because she was very good. And I just hope that that the coming services that we have that we're signing on to are just as efficient as she was. She caught a possum in my garage in 30 minutes. So I do hope that that we have that kind of service as well. That's all I wanted to say.
All right, I relinquish the chair back to Sharice.
Thank you, Mary Alice. Are we ready to call a roll then? Or is there any other comments? Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo your comments, Sharice. Full disclosure, we have a dog at our house that gets out of makes a run for it whenever the doors open. So we used her services a lot, and she was an outstanding animal control officer and did a great job for us.
Okay, any more discussion? Thank you, Chris. Grace?
Thanks. Yeah, I just agree. Already had those kinds of positive experiences and hope that we can find some kinds of things for the nighttime too, because I do feel like there's a different feel with an officer with like a vehicle with the back cage and things versus someone who might not be prepared when they're out and about and just putting an animal in the back of a car. So I don't know if, down the road, if there's some like 24-hour options, I think that would be great as well.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, Ms. Clark, would you please take the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin.
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. That passes. Moving on to item 7, ordinance number 2022 -01-002, an ordinance authorizing purchase of certain real estate, 1501 East Mumford Drive. And I think Carol is here for that.
Yes, I will present this item, and I am joined by Fire Chief Chuck Loss and Deputy Fire Chief Damon Dade if you have any technical questions from the fire department's perspective, but I'm going to present this item. And you, I hope, will recall that this was presented to you in a closed session back in December. But this is an ordinance requesting that the ordinance would authorize the purchase of a parcel of land with the address of 1501 East Mumford Drive. And I'm going to share my screen and just put a aerial photograph of the site so people can see it. It's the, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but it's the green square in the southeast quadrant of Mumford and Philo Road. So the intended use of this property is the construction of the replacement for Fire Station number 2, which is currently located across the street at 2103 South Philo Road. Just by way of background, the facilities master plan, which was completed a couple of years ago, identified the need to replace both Fire Station number 2 on Philo Road and Fire Station number 3 on Lincoln Avenue. And so the site on the existing site, in anticipation of a future replacement, there had been the site next door to the existing fire station was purchased, but together those two parcels only contain a half an acre of land. And there's a desire to have more flexibility in the design of the replacement fire station. And the entirety of the site that we're acquiring is about 5.5 acres. And this will allow us flexibility in the design. And if you remember from the discussion in the CIP, the capital improvement plan, before we decide how much we're going to spend on each station, there will be a scoping done. And so we will come to you with a series of options. Having a site of this size allows us the option to include a variety of things, such as the design of the new fire station could be a drive-through design, and being on a corner would facilitate that. It would also allow for, instead of a 2-bay station, it would allow for a 3-bay station. And the larger footprint can also accommodate such things as community space, and the potential for ambulance bays, should that be desired. And so at this point in the process, we're really looking for the flexibility that this site would allow for the long-term plan. I mean, the fire station that we have now has been in service for more than 50 years. And so this is a 50-year decision, and we want to make sure we have adequate land to do that. Now, this land is currently farmed by Solo Gracia, and we have agreed to allow them and enter into a lease with them to allow this, that they would have the growing season in 2022. They have negotiated, they don't have a signed agreement, but they have an agreement in principle with the owners of that also own this land. They own land to the east that is the unbuilt land in the Eagle Ridge subdivision, that they will be purchasing the entirety of the land that has not been built, aside from some buffer land that will be purchased by some of the homeowners. But they will basically be getting 5 times the amount of land that they are farming now. So and they will own it. So the farm, there's a transition that will take place, but this will allow for them to have a long-term home. And I think that's good for everyone. So we've conducted our due diligence at this point. Even though there's a contingency in the contract, it's already been satisfied. We've done a phase 1 environmental assessment, and there are no known contaminants on the property. The price is based on an appraisal that we obtained, and the property owner has agreed to it in the amount of $905,000. And just as a point of reference, during closed session, Mary Alice had asked about the parcel of land that we had bought on Lincoln that's to the north of Fire Station number 3. And just as a point of comparison, and we paid $220,000 for that, for approximately a half an acre of land, and that was at a rate of $8 per square foot. And this purchase is at the rate of $3.50 per square foot. And as I discussed in the memo, I don't anticipate that we're going to use all this land, but this gives us the flexibility to plan. And then at the point that we've decided what the actual site is, then we can have a further discussion about disposition of whatever excess land there may be. So as I said, Chief Loss and Chief Dade are here. If you have any technical questions, I'm available to answer questions as well. And that's the end of my presentation, but I hope you'll support this transaction.
Sharice, I have a
Thank
question.
you. Okay, sorry, I was just getting unmuted there. Mary Alice?
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. Thank you, Carol, for following up on the purchase price. That was one of my questions. Has anybody talked? I didn't realize that Head Start was just adjacent to that property. Has anybody talked to them about the use of that property?
No, well, we haven't, I should say. We have not.
I would assume that the build of the new fire station would be closer to that corner. So
Yes.
opposite, that's kind of the current plan. All right. And then I can't remember, what is roughly the percentage of calls that we get at that firehouse?
That I'm going to have to turn to our experts, either Chief Loss or Chief Dade.
Sure. Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you all tonight and answer some of these questions. And greatly appreciate your consideration of the purchase of this property. The percentage of calls coming out of that station, we run a lot of EMS calls out of that station. We do run fire calls as well, and hazmat calls, and all the other gamut of calls, but we run a lot of EMS calls out of that station. I would say that probably easy, and this is a guess because I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but easily probably 30 to 35% of the calls are going to come out of station number 2 on Philo.
So a pretty even distribution between the 3 firehouses, it sounds like. No, there's 4 firehouses, sorry.
Yeah, actually we have 4. So it's fairly busy on EMS calls. The majority, we get a lot of EMS calls out of that station.
Okay, all right. I think, yeah, those, let me see here. Oh, my other question, Carol, maybe this one you might answer. In the memo, it says the city has agreed to enter into a lease. Is that in case they're not able to close on the other property?
They don't intend to close on that until 2023. So this was, we had a conversation with them early on, and we said that we have no problem leasing them the ground. And you know, I don't want to pretend to know anything about farming, but I believe you have to kind of like prepare the ground. So it's not like you just start planting things. So this will give them transition time.
Okay, but what we have in front of us is to purchase the property. It's not the lease of the property.
That's correct. And it'll be a 1 year, it'll be less than a year lease. And so that won't come to council.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions for our presenters or Chief Dade or Chief Loss? Loss, my bad. Grace.
Thank you for the presentation. I think there's definitely some potential here for sure. And I was wondering, the financial impact wasn't mentioned here. I don't know, I guess we're talking about it also in a budget amendment. I don't know if that's more of the place, but I'm wondering, my first question was where it comes from, and it looks like the general fund, and then wondering if this was already allocated. It seems like it wasn't, obviously not already budgeted, but kind of where this is coming from and how that fits in the financial picture.
Okay. This was not anticipated when we put the CIP together. So it isn't already allocated, which is why there's a budget amendment. And I apologize, I forgot to mention that. So this is coming from the general fund, and just, you could think of it as just being added to the CIP. But just like the CIP has placeholders in it right now for the fire stations, and we will come back with some scoping for you all to decide what exactly you want these replacement fire stations to look like. How big do you want them to be? What ancillary facilities do you want them to have? So, this will be a work in progress, and this is the first piece of the work in progress, is to get control of this piece of ground.
Thank you. And I do appreciate that we would have another chance to look at, that would be another discussion you're saying will be what is done with this land and how to deal with the old fire station and the land next to it and this new property will be another thing that will be discussed. Is there any approval from council on that kind of thing for a major construction project? Is that standard?
Well, I don't know that we'll be building something there. I don't know that the city will be building something there. You mean about whatever we do with the excess? Is that your question?
With the new property before building.
Oh. Well, the role of the council in that will be, we've selected, just to give a little overview, a little thumbnail. We've selected we used a request for qualifications. So we used a qualifications-based selection process to select the design team that will design the 2 fire stations. And we're currently negotiating the contract with them. So when you do a qualifications-based selection, you don't ask for bids, you base it on qualifications, and then you attempt to negotiate a price with your preferred firm. And that's the process that we're in right now. Then in each case, for each of the fire stations, number 2 and number 3, we plan to come back to you with basically, it could be 5 choices, but for general talking purposes, we'll have like a stripped down version, and then we'll have I don't know what the Lexus version, it used to say Cadillac. I don't know if people say that anymore, but then there's some kind of in between, like a Chevrolet. I don't know cars, but there'd be like a stripped down version. There'd be a medium version, and then there'll be a more elaborate version. And each of those is going to have costs associated with them. And then you all will decide what budget do you really want, how much funding do you want to put to this? And then at that point, that's your decision, is you fund it. And then there may be check-in points, but that's your decision point, is how much funding do you want to put to the replacement fire stations?
And I think I recall in the budget conversations for this last round, when we budgeted for some of the design work on those, that we had talked about being sure to check in before the design phase is complete while it's still in process, get in council and the public, so that we're not just brought with 5 things we've never seen before, but that we have kind of more of a conversation along the way. So I hope that that's still.
Oh yeah, each of the design teams that we brought in to interview talked about what their public engagement process looks like. And there's a lot of different features that have to be balanced in designing these stations. And one that will speak very directly to you is the sustainability pieces. How far do you take that when you have to trade some of those features off against operational pieces? So we're going to try to make that as plug and play, so that as you decide what you want to look at, that you can easily decide what an increment costs. So if we do geothermal, what's that cost add to a particular site versus what if we do a community room? What's that incremental cost? I think it'll be a good process. We're very excited about the team that we have. I mean, very excited. They have a national reputation.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Carol. Just for the public's interest, we will not be using ARPA money for these fire stations, correct?
I think that remains to be seen. That remains to be seen whether or not you want to use any of it to add features. But it's in the CI. It'll be. You can think of it traditionally as the CIP. But if there are features that you want to add and use ARPA money to fund that, that's an option. But those decisions haven't been made as we sit here today. This is general fund money, or it will be money that we borrow. But it'll all get paid back out of the general fund.
If we borrow, will there be interest rates, cost, debt service, that kind of thing?
there will be debt service. You'll have to ask Elizabeth about some of the details on that, because she's talked about the opportunity to do internal borrowing, and I don't know if you pay yourself interest when you do internal borrowing, but if we do external borrowing, we definitely have interest payments. Elizabeth, do we pay ourselves interest on internal borrowing?
Yeah, we would, because if we do internal borrowing from our treasury fund, essentially there's less interest earned and distributed to the other funds that we're borrowing from. So there would still be some interest cost.
Okay, thank you.
Grace?
Thanks. I was debating on if this is a discussion or question, but I think that it is a question. I would be interested in a response from staff. I have the question that I feel like is reasonable from an outsider perspective of how do we have almost $1 million in the general fund that we can put towards this, when it seems like when we try and do anything else, there's never money for anything. How do we have almost $1 million in the general fund that we can spare towards this that isn't budgeted and wasn't allocated or flagged for it? So I'm wondering if you can just help me and maybe people of the public who have the same question understand that.
Sure, and Elizabeth might join me in this, but that's what fund balance is for, right? That's the money that, when we look at our budget, there's multiple. I mean, I'm a good layperson to explain the budget because I don't know it the way that Elizabeth does, but there's recurring expenses and recurring revenues, and that's when we look at whether our lines are intersecting in a good way or we don't want them to intersect. When they intersect, it means that expenses are starting to exceed our recurring revenues. But we do have a policy about maintaining a certain level of fund balance. And we had a healthy fund balance at the end of, or actually when we put the last budget together, and we have a healthy fund balance now. You'll hear more about it next week, I think. But that's where it's coming from. It's coming from our, what I'll call the rainy day fund. Elizabeth, do you want to add anything to my simple description there?
Yeah, I mean, I think Carol is right. That the challenge in balancing the budget is usually balancing recurring revenues against recurring expense. But it often happens after the end of the fiscal year, we won't have spent everything that we plan to spend, and we'll carry over a little more fund balance than we were anticipating. And so that happened at the end of last year. And so we have more fund balance than we expected when we did the budget.
Yeah, thank you for explaining. And I'm still just having a hard time understanding why, when it comes to other things like supporting community-led organizations addressing gun violence or other surveys or things, that there's not something there. I feel like we're like squabbling and moving money from one place to another because there's this idea that there is no surplus that exists. And then it sounds like there is this rainy day fund, healthy fund balance. And I'm just wondering kind of the status of that.
Mayor Marlin, you want to?
Just wanted to give another example of using the fund balance for a community need, and that was the recent vote to give $50,000 from the general fund. It's a one-time expenditure to support the CU at Home overnight emergency shelter. That came from that balance, so that it is available for that sort of use, and that's what it was used for. And when it comes to funding community organizations, that's part of the upcoming ARPA discussion, obviously.
Elizabeth, you wanted to add to that?
Well, I would just say that there's a big difference from the planning perspective between trying to fund something that's a one-time expense and trying to fund something that has an ongoing cost. And we have to evaluate that carefully to see whether it is actually sustainable. I know you're going to see the forecast next week, but I have to say, based on what I know at this point, I would not be comfortable recommending that we absorb any additional new recurring expense in the general fund, because at this point where we are in the pandemic and what the outlook is, I don't think that would be sustainable.
Mary Alice?
I have two questions. So Elizabeth, remind me, we have a fiscal policy that states the percentage of reoccurring expenses that we keep in the general fund. Is that right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Right, correct. Our goal is to have our recurring expenses at 98.5% of recurring revenues. And the reason for the little buffer is that it's really hard to accurately predict revenues. And so you'll see this when you see the forecast, but we're actually projecting, because we don't know exactly how the pandemic is going to play out, that will probably be above that level for some period of time. And we'll actually have to kind of cover that gap with fund balance until things completely bounce back.
Okay, and then I just want to be clear. You had mentioned the CIP, and certainly the replacement of the 2 different firehouses is in that CIP. Did we, I can't remember if we set aside a certain amount of money every year, or if it comes out of different accounts for the CIP. Basically what I'm trying to get at here is, if we have a dollar figure that we've kind of set aside amongst different accounts to invest in our infrastructure, how does that interact with this payment of $905,000, if at all?
So we do, in our financial policies, we kind of have established a baseline amount of funding in the general fund that supports projects in the capital improvement fund specifically. And that, and under our policies, that increases each year based on the increase in the construction cost index. But as you know, we will often supplement that with other one-time amounts of money to fund specific projects. So like this land acquisition, or like the equity quality of life project. Those are both one-time additions from the general fund to fund capital improvements.
So in other words, what I'm hearing you say is this is not cutting into the amount that we had originally planned to spend on infrastructure. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions for our presenters? Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to forward ordinance number 2022-01-002, an ordinance authorizing purchase of certain real estate, 1501 East Mumford Drive, on to City Council for approval.
And I'll second that.
Okay.
Is that on
Jaya?
consent
Jaya.
agenda?
Yeah, if we can put that on the consent agenda.
Okay, consent agenda. Okay, thank you, Jaya, for making the motion, and Mary Alice for seconding. Any more discussion? James?
Yeah, I will note that I will be abstaining from this vote because of the interaction this has with Sola Gratia Farm, and the fact that I am the current board president of St. Matthew Lutheran Church, which is the sole owner of the corporation, which is Sola Gratia Farm.
Thank you, James. Is there any other Grace discussion?
Thank you. Just want to say that I appreciate the work that you guys do with fire and medical emergency response. And I live close to that station here, you know, when you guys are busy throughout the day and night, whenever I'm home, I appreciate that work. I think there are definitely benefits to not have to back up on Philo Road, have a bigger space, have the equipment and safety things that are needed for that, especially coordinating with possibly getting people a quicker medical response. If you could have ambulance docking there, whatever it might be. I think there's a lot of possibilities here. I would love to see us doing something creative with that space. So I'm looking forward to having input from council and the public as we go through the designs about, like Carol said, what other things could be there. Things that get me excited are like the community space, spaces for ambulance, maybe keeping some gardening things, maybe having some alternative response station there. I think there's a lot of possibilities with the new site. And then also the old site, I'm really interested in how the old site and that adjacent space could be used. I think it's a great spot. Location in the community could be used for community center or other kinds of emergency response things. So I see a lot of potential here, and I hope that we can keep moving in a direction where we get input and feedback along the way, and we find something that really works well for that key space on Philo Road that really helps the community and helps our emergency response things. So I look forward to those conversations.
Any more discussion or comment before Jaya?
Just also want to say that I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to have a way that we're not asking our fire trucks to back out into Philo. You know, that's been a major safety concern, and I appreciate all of the staff working to find, I think, a really meaningful solution to that and some other challenges with the current option.
Okay. Chief Dade, I think you had your hand up. You wanted to say anything?
Yeah, I just want to say on behalf of the fire department, we're honored that you guys can show the continued support and partnership with the city council, or the city council shows towards the city administration with working to get this done. You guys have been working on this long before I got here, so it's much appreciated.
Thank you. Chief Loss?
Yeah, I too, I think wanted to echo exactly what Chief Day just said as well. To Mary Alice's question, I had one of my firefighters, Brian Hoff, that just sent me the numbers, the run numbers, and that station runs 34.10% of the calls. So we were pretty doggone close in guessing it was 30 to 35%. So 34.1% of the calls come out of that station. Again, echoing what Chief Day just said, thank you so much for your consideration of this. Pretty exciting for the city of Urbana as we move forward with this. I greatly appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Chief Loss. Any more discussion or comment before we call the roll? Okay, Ms. Clark, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes. Oh, sorry, I'm abstaining.
Okay.
Called my name so early, I forgot.
Ms. Wilkin?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Okay, that ordinance has been passed and sent and put onto the consent agenda for next week. Thank you. Next is ordinance number 2022-01-003, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance, budget amendment number 5, omnibus, and this is finance and HR presenting.
Yep. Hello, everyone. This is Eliana Robinson. I will be presenting to you the fifth budget amendment to the fiscal year 2022 budget. We have several changes that affect the budget, so I will go through these items quickly, and I'll be happy to answer any questions afterwards. There are a couple of things that will affect general operating fund. The first one is related to COVID-related items. So HR is requesting additional $15,000 to be budgeted for PPE supplies related to COVID expenses. So these are items like face masks, sanitizers, that will help reduce the spread of this new COVID variant. The next item is related to the budget overtime in fire department. So they have experienced an unusual amount of overtime related to absences due to COVID and duty injuries. So this budget amendment is to request an increase of about $161,000 to their overtime budget. And as we will continue to evaluate and monitor this situation. And this next item there, it's related to the ordinance number 2022-01-002. which was discussed earlier regarding the purchase of land for the fire station. So an additional 905,000 will be transferred from the general operating fund to the capital improvement plan fund for the purchase of this land. And so this will be reflected in both revenue and expense in the capital improvement plan fund. And then the next item, which is also related to the discussion earlier regarding the intergovernmental agreement for animal control services. So this amendment will reallocate $28,560 from a salary line item to contractual services line item to pay for these services. And then the next one regarding video production services. So UPTV does not have enough staffing to accommodate all the city's video production needs. So we are requesting to reallocate $5,000 from personal line items to a contractual services line item to pay for outside services for these production. And then the last item under general fund, we are requesting additional $6,500 to cover for pre-employment exam costs. And this is due to an anticipated higher number of new hires this year. And then the last item I wanted to point out, which is regarding the new infrastructure replacement in IT. And I believe Mr. Stanford has had a presentation January 10th about this. So this amendment will affect two funds, VERF, which is the Vehicle and Equipment Replacement Fund, and then IT fund. So we have an total estimated cost of $112,000 and $120 for this replacement, which we already have $25,000 budgeted in IT fund for the new services. So that will offset some of the costs. So we are requesting an additional about $87,000 to cover for the total estimated cost. And then a new VERF item will be set up for the virtual servers that will be scheduled for replacement every 7 years. So there will be a one-time transfer for the virtual servers, which has a estimated cost of about $46,000. So that will also be reflected in the VERF fund, both revenue and expense. So I believe I have pointed out all the items in this budget amendment, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, are there any questions for Ms. Robinson? Mary Alice?
Yeah, I have two questions. Thank you for the review of the memo. It looks like about 176,000 is for COVID-related items. So that's the overtime for the fire and then the PPE. Is that eligible for any federal grant, or is the remaining ARPA funds, is that where that could potentially go?
That I am not sure. I will have Elizabeth fill in.
So I believe the Stafford grant funding is pretty much done at this point. It is, I think, potentially eligible for ARPA funds, and it could fall under, if it's not technically eligible, it could also be handled through revenue replacement, which is an eligible use of ARPA funds. But we're tracking all of these COVID-related expenses using project codes in the ledger, and so we'll make sure to maximize the amount that we can get back for these expenses to the extent possible.
Okay, and then I'm trying to understand, I know that Sanford came and gave us a presentation on virtualization. I appreciate that presentation. In terms of the dollars here, we're talking approximately 135,000. So I've basically added the 87,000 and the additional 46,000. Is that correct?
So the total The total cost for this, it's $112,000, about $112,000. So the 87 is just in addition to what was already budgeted to cover for the whole cost. So the 46,000 is in part of that 112.
Oh, the 46,000 is part of the 112.
So that is just explaining.
Okay, sorry, I missed that.
To the roof.
Okay, so if I remember correctly, we changed how the books are run for IT, and now it's kind of a service, so to speak, where we bill back to all the different departments who use IT. Sanford, is that accurate?
That's accurate.
So does this mean that we'll increase the chargebacks to the other departments because we're increasing our annual expenditure?
So ultimately, it will be reflected in the interfund charges. We're not making those changes now for the current year because it'll take a while for all that to flow through. And I'm not clear that we're going to actually charge everything that's in the budget currently.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Are there any more questions to our presenters? Grace.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I had the same question was on, and I'm still struggling to understand. So you're saying this VERF fund is part of that 112,000 in the information technology fund amendment?
Yes. So in VERF, so everything that we replace or is scheduled to be replaced that is over $5,000, which is considered a capital expense, we move that into the VERF fund. So this is just showing or explaining that 46. So of that total cost, $46,000 will be moved to VERF fund.
Of the 87 that we're moving?
Yes.
And it's not a separate thing?
No, so that's part of the total cost for this or replacement. So Sanford, if you can fill in to the, right, so the virtual servers is like the estimated cost is about $46,000, which we plan on replacing every 7 years. Correct?
Right.
And that is part of that total estimated cost that you provided.
Right. So if you have a pen and paper at home, you can scratch this down. Out of the total of, I'm going to go with round numbers. Out of a total of approximately $112,000, $46,000 that is hardware. So that's going to be money out the door right away. $35,000, well, $35,500 is Windows licensing. $15,500 is network equipment. And approximately $15,000 is contractual services to help us make this transition. Okay. Now, the only one of these that really gets special treatment here is the hardware for the servers. So the way that I'm going to tell you, much like Carol told you, her layperson's definition, the VERF is a tool that we use to plan for future replacements. So we're going to buy that equipment now, and it comes with a 7-year replacement warranty. So it's going to last 7 years. What we do from now on is every year we will budget approximately 1/7 of the cost into and put that money into the VERF, which is then being built up for a future replacement equipment. And in 7 years, we'll go to the VERF, and theoretically, we should have enough money in the VERF to buy the replacement equipment. So what we're doing here is we're making a one-time purchase, which is just going to be money out the door, but then we're setting up the replacement fund in the VERF. Does that help?
Yes, a little bit. I was trying to look at the numbers and make sense too. And so it looks like, because the VERF's coming in and out, we've got a positive and negative 46,100, and then adding up the rest of those comes out to the 87K. Okay, I think it's making sense.
Yeah, so that's the 112 total. The 87 is because this is, budgeting wise. the 112 is the total cost of the project, but we in IT already had $25,000 that was in our budget for replacement hardware. So we're applying that $25,000 towards the overall purchase. And that's why the net request is 87,000.
Okay, thank you. And then another question I had was about the overall financial impact, and kind of a little bit continuing our other conversation about the general fund and saying the remaining balance of 11.5 million, of which is 31.5% of recurring expenditures. And I understand, I think that we'll have a financial forecast later, so there'll maybe be more in-depth presentation. But I was wondering if you could, I don't know, give a little bit of like what's remaining in that. What does that percent of the general fund mean, being that we're almost halfway through the fiscal year, and what's remaining as like rainy day stuff in the general fund?
So I'll jump in on that one. So our goal is when we approve the budget to have a 25% fund balance. And the thinking behind that has to do with all the risks that we potentially face in our budget, all the things that could happen, revenue shortfalls, unexpected expenses. There's a whole analysis that the Government Finance Officers Association recommends that you go through to come up with an appropriate fund balance number. That's not to say we would in this case, we won't go through below that level, but that's not to say that we never would. That's why the money's there. So if something catastrophic happens, like we have a big tornado and we need a lot of cash quickly, that would be where that would come from, and then we would replenish that over time.
Okay.
I'm not sure if there was more to the question, but
I think it's kind of making sense. So it's kind of just the account that we don't want it to get below 25% of the fund balance. And right now we're at 31.5% at this point in the year.
Yeah, it's kind of our safety net. And we'll spend a lot of time talking about that when we talk about the forecast, which should be next week, because it's a really important component of our planning for the future and our ability to maintain services consistently for the city.
Thank you.
Okay, Chandra?
Yes, I had a quick question about the fire operations overtime. Is that 161,000 already expended on overtime, or is that like an anticipated number? Because it also says that you'll expect to have to request more.
So that's a projected number specifically for those two items for leave related to COVID and duty injuries through the end of the current fiscal year, based on what we know at this point. There are other overtime items that we're still evaluating. So there probably will be an additional request.
Okay, Mary Alice?
So based on your explanation about the IT, it seems to me like we are adding a reoccurring expense of 46,100. Is that correct? Or because we already have 25,000 that we're now using, is it less than that?
Well, we're adding an expense of $46,000. So I'm looking at the detail lines as part of the information that was presented on page 5 here. So, essentially what we will do is we'll spend that $46,000 right now. Now, the entries that are being made into the VERF, money is being put into the VERF to buy that from. That's why there's the revenue to the offset it. So it's as if we said, you know what, let's pretend that we had saved money for the last 7 years. Put that money in the VERF, build up its balance, and let it buy the equipment. And then from now on, we'll budget and transfer into the VERF approximately 1/7 of that. So about $7,000 a year.
Okay, so it sounds to me like the reoccurring expense that we will have from this project would be $7,000 a year. It's not a lot I'm just looking at the fiscal impact statement on this memo, which is it will not increase the reoccurring revenues or reoccurring expenditures. 7,000 is not a lot of money, but it does increase it by 7,000, right? Because it's going to be a reoccurring expense.
It does, but actually we have been budgeting $25,000 a year for hardware replacements for the old servers, which I'm not going to say it's a complete net because there's other hardware we have to buy too, but it's going to offset other stuff that we now will not buy.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I will say that the one recurring expense that probably is the most significant of all is the Windows licensing, because and that just becomes a flat cost year to year. So, but Windows licensing is based on at least part on how many virtual servers you're running, and so that's going to increase.
Are there any more questions for our presenters? Grace.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could just clarify a little more about what video production would be contracted and if it's moving by the numbers, because I see the deduction in insurance and IMRF CERS. So if you could clarify what kind of video production services that is and how the finances work.
Sure.
That would be Mr. Stanford.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry. Historically, what happened was UPTV produced videos for not just the city, but for other entities as well. And, you know, God bless Jason Liggett, but he was working far more hours per week than he should have been. And so these were services that Jason was doing, and then that was one of the reasons that he exceeded his hours and was one of the reasons he burnt out and he's no longer with the city. So when he left, we've replaced his position with Brema, who is not quite in the same level of position. Jason was the station manager, Brema is the production coordinator. Also, Jason had salary increases due to his longevity with the city. So there was some money that was freed up in the budget due to the change in staffing. And one of the things that as one of my roles as the IT director is also to oversee UPTV. But in terms of the things that we no longer had the time to do, outside video production services was one of them. So we've identified some money by saying, well, you know, we don't have quite the staffing that we did have. So therefore, we're going to make that money available for people to use either outside services, you know, or whatever. But basically, they can't look at UPTV as a free video production facility anymore.
And that was who, like community organizations, or what kind of videos was the city producing for other entities, or which other entities?
So it wasn't that frequent. It was more city people who were doing some of these things, but we have done video production services for some of the other entities. I cannot recall off the top of my head. But also internally, it was some of the past work that was done for public arts or for the mayor, or for some public community messages were made. And again, all through UPTV, Jason spending his own time. So there was a recent, example of this, that there was a public arts video that was made with outside services, looked and sounded fabulous. Everything was great. We just have to recognize that the city has to cut back on some of the things that we're doing due to decreased staffing levels that we have.
And I'm imagining that doesn't include campaign videos, correct?
As far as I'm aware, UPTV does not produce campaign videos.
Okay. And the money transfer, so from insurance and stuff, you're saying that's like what's showing up on this last page, that's because of transferring from salary related stuff for this?
That's right. There should be, I'm looking at the lines now. There should, well, actually, no, I'm sorry, because that's right. Because of the difference of, and now we're getting a little bit in the weeds on how, people make decisions, and I don't want to necessarily point that out too much, but because of the insurance options that people chose, the UPTV the insurance costs were going to be significantly less. And so due to those savings, we found the money to transfer over to afford the contractual services.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any more questions for our presenters? Mary Alice?
I don't have any questions, but I'm happy to make a motion. I move, and this one can't go on the consent agenda, I believe, because it's a budget amendment. I move ordinance number 2022-01003, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance, budget amendment number 5 omnibus to City Council with the recommendation for approval.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Who's it? Jaya? Okay. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Grace?
Thank you. Just had a quick thing about the PPE expense. I definitely support that and support people being safe and taking precautions. And I think it's even more effective when it's used properly all the time, or at least almost all the time whenever possible. I don't want to get into specifics, pointing fingers or things, but there have been multiple times where I've seen precautions not fully in place in the city building. And I hope that we can make that more of a encouraged, incentivized, normalized thing to be using proper protection all the time whenever possible. I know it's hard and it stinks wearing a mask all day, but I think it is really important, especially with the new variant and having staff out absent. I'm not blaming, pointing fingers, just saying that I hope that we can make it very clear that with city staff, we've got systems in place to provide safety equipment. Sounds like you guys have been accommodating with working remotely and having COVID time off. And I think those are great things. And I think we also need to be taking all appropriate and possible precautions on the individual side and top down for management, making sure that precautions are being used.
Any other discussion? Okay, Ms. Clark, would you call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop.
Yes.
Okay, that was item number 8. And moving on, kind of have a question here because I'm looking at 9, 10, and 11, and they seem to be all in the same field and basically the same thing. Can that be consolidated at all? So that when we're talking about
Sheila can discuss them all when she gives her report.
Okay. I know that they seem to all be in the same, they're all CD. That's why I was wondering. Okay, so we have Sheila. You're going to be discussing ordinances 2022-01-004, ordinance 2022-01-005, and ordinance 2022-01-006.
Yeah. So good evening. Tonight I'd like to bring to you 3 city-owned properties that we would like to dispose of. I know Scott Test came to you in the fall with some properties as well. These were funded through the grants program, so they don't require a public hearing and we can go straight to disposition. 704 North Broadway was purchased through CDBG and a blight reduction program through the state of Illinois. The lot has been cleared. It had a very blighted property on it, and it's ready for redevelopment. Habitat has shown interest in it and would like to take the property so that they can build a new single-family house on the lot. 1407 Wiley is a property that we got through judicial deed, and then it had a really bad leaking roof. So we used our CDBG funds to put a new roof on the property, but it does need extensive rehab. We reached out to First Followers and they have gone inside the property and would like to take the property and rehab it through their work program, as well as then use it for an affordable rental unit. And then the final property is at 1201 Beslin. The city has owned this a very long time. I know when I was still at Habitat, it was tried to be marketed to other people, but it's just such a small lot, and with the side yard and front yard setbacks, and then the placement of the driveway, as well as the large trees that are on the lot, it just is not feasible for development. And so the Habitat owner at 1203 Beslin has been caring for the property for the last 2 years and reached out saying that she would be interested in taking care of it always, that there won't be anything built on it, but it will be taken care of and maintained as it has been recently. So that's a quick rundown of the properties. Do you have any questions?
Mary Alice?
All right, I got my 3 questions.
Sure.
Number 1, I noticed that affordable housing is defined as 80% of the median family income. I realize that is, which is the definition of affordable housing. I know that depends on the number of dependents that you have.
Yes.
So for a family of 4, meaning 2 kids, do you have a rough approximation of what that amount would be?
Roughly 65,000. That'll change again here in a couple months, but that's what it would be right now.
So that would be 80%?
Mm-hmm. Habitat typically builds for the 60% or less range, but they could go up to 80. So I just made the contract the maximum they could do.
Okay, my second question is, I noticed the agreements include only 10 years of affordable housing, a guarantee, and is that some kind of, is that a stipulation in the funds, or is that something that we just typically do? Why the 10 years?
It's the amount of funds that have been invested in the property. So, you know, if you do one amount, it's 5 years. If you do another amount, it's 10, and it can go up to 20 years. So it's just the amount we've invested.
Okay, all right. And then my third question is, I know that we've helped first followers in the past with some items that are related to housing. Have we ever sold houses with this intent of providing affordable housing to first followers?
No, this will be the first time for them. They are at Choto this year, and they did rehab 2 units in partnership with a nonprofit owner. And it turned out very well. I talked to them about capacity, and they feel like this is one that they'd really like to own and start their own portfolio, so that people who are going through their work programs, they would have a place to stay.
So does this mean that they have the funds to rehab it, or does this mean that they'll be using the Choto funds to rehab it?
At this point, it may be both. You know, they may come back to us at a later date for Choto or home funding. And, you know, it's certainly eligible, but they think they have some of the funding set aside. And like I said, they've got 2 years to do that.
Okay. And then I guess my last question is, I noticed that it has to have an occupancy of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
So does the 10 years start in when they get that letter of occupancy?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Because it's the affordability period of the tenant. So, you know, if there is a 2-year gap, you know, like obviously Habitat and I'm sure First Followers funding slowed down during COVID. We can't count that. We have to count it at the time it's occupied.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any more questions for Ms. Dodd? Grace?
I was wondering, and then I think I've just gotten the answer about the last property on West Beslin. I was having a hard time understanding why the property wasn't feasible for construction and why it would just stay vacant. But I think I'm understanding now that there's no structure there currently at all.
Correct. That's correct. It's just a very small lot that has been vacant a long time. I mean, at least 15 years that I'm aware of. So it's probably much longer than that.
Okay, so it'll just be like an extension of this property owner, adjacent property owner's yard, and they'll take care of the maintenance fees and pay property taxes on it, correct?
Yes, yes. And they've been taking care of the maintenance. Like I said, the last couple years, they just didn't have the taxes.
Okay. And then these are each being sold for $1. Is that correct?
Yes.
Typical kinds of thing we do when we're selling it to a nonprofit or just getting it off the city's hands for maintenance costs. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's typically what we do with our grant funding is because we can't gain a profit. So transferring them to be used for affordable housing or to extend, like you said, the lot at 1203 Beslin. That's why we do the $1.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mary Alice?
I'm sorry, I have one more question. So I noticed that one of the benefits was to put these properties back on the tax rolls. And I thought that non-for-profits didn't pay tax. Am I incorrect on that? So the First Followers House?
They will have to pay taxes, and Habitat pays taxes.
I figured Habitat did because it eventually goes to the person who's owning it, right, renting it.
Well, there's a lot of dispute over that, but because they are an affordable housing developer, they are a nonprofit organization. Some habitats throughout the state of Illinois don't pay real estate taxes during their term of ownership. Obviously, when it turns over, they do. But our county, they pay. And I know when I was at Habitat, I tried to dispute it because it adds up to a lot of money. Over a year's time, you're looking at $10,000 to $12,000 of vacant lots in real estate taxes. But I am guessing because of Habitat status that First Followers will pay taxes as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mary Alice, could you take the chair for a minute?
Sure. The chair recognizes Sharice.
Hi. Okay. Sheila, I just want to understand with the First Followers, they're going to be restoring a home.
Mm-hmm.
And,
yes.
And then using that house to for people that are in their program or like transitional housing when
yeah, potentially, or it may turn into something that one of their employees rent. They just want to make it affordable rental to use in their program.
Okay. And the property on Beslin, is that the little corner area
Yes.
across the street from King School?
Yes.
That's been vacant for like 20 something years, I think.
Yeah.
It's been vacant for a while. All right, I just wanted to understand that, and that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, I relinquish the chair back to Sharice.
Thank you, Mary Alice. Are there any other questions for Ms. Dodd? Okay, I'd entertain a motion at this point. One question. Is there any way that we can consolidate these ordinances together? Can somebody give me an answer on that?
I think we could have a motion to ombuds them, but since we're putting them, if we put them on the consent agenda, they'll all be considered with the consent agenda.
Okay, so yeah, why don't we think about that? Okay, is there a motion? Anybody?
I'll move to send ordinance number 2022-01-04, 004, 005, and 006. Can I do that and just say all three? And
Yes.
onto the consent agenda for approval on the consent agenda.
I think if we're gonna, so I think the way it works, Phyllis, correct me if I'm wrong, that we need to have a vote to say all those, to move it to one, and then we have a vote on that one.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, so Chandra, let's see. Can we say that we?
Yeah. I move that we, what's the word? Combined omnibus.
Yeah, omnibus.
Omnibus the ordinances Ordinance number 2022-01-004, and ordinance authorizing the sale of certain real estate at 704 North Broadway Avenue. Ordinance number 2022-01-005, and ordinance authorizing the sale of certain real estate at 1201 West Breslin, and ordinance number 2022-01-006, and ordinance authorizing the sale of certain real estate at 1407 Wiley Drive.
Is there a second?
Second.
Omnibus. James. Okay, so it has been moved by Chandra and seconded by James to omnibus the three ordinances. Is there any discussion? Okay, Ms. Clark, could you call? Oh, wait, Grace.
Thank you. Just want to real quickly say that I appreciate supporting affordable housing and these nonprofits and kind of thinking strategically about city-owned real estate. I think it makes sense here. I think it's always cool if we can have like a pocket park or something, but I understand if that's not always feasible and how this works out in this instance. But just want to say that I appreciate community development's work on that and reaching out to these nonprofits to try and have these, especially houses that are sitting there not being used, getting renovated and made for affordable housing.
Okay, is there anyone else that would like to discuss the omnibus? Ms. Clark, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
Okay, those three ordinances are now put together. Can I get a motion to move these ordinances to for approval to City Council? Consent agenda. Anybody willing to make the motion?
I will make that motion that we put on the consent agenda, this omnibus, three bills that we just combined into one with well, it's on the consent agenda, but recommendation for approval.
And second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Any discussion? All right, Ms. Clark, could you please take the roll?
Well, to tell you the honest truth, when you moved it in omnibus fashion like that, it only takes the one vote to send it all. So the second nominations that you were making to send it in to consent agenda was really not necessary. So it's already down for consent agenda.
Okay, is it also already voted?
I'm not sure I understand that. You have to take a motion for the things to be considered together.
Right,
you
and
have
when
to
you
take
all
a
voted, you
motion.
voted for omnibus, and you all passed that vote for omnibus. The one vote
That was
we
just to
needed
combine them, though. That was
Beg your
not to,
pardon?
that was just to combine them. That was not to send them to council with recommendation for approval. We do have to take this second vote.
Okay, if that's what you want me to do, then I will do that. If that'll make you feel better. How's that?
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
Okay, we're done.
It's seconded and moved on to City Council. The last thing on our agenda is resolution number 2022-01-003R, a resolution adopting mayor, city council strategic goals for 2022 to 2023.
I'll just introduce this if I can. So we prepared this for your consideration to adopt the strategic areas and then the strategies under those strategic areas that have been developed over the 4 meetings that the council had in the 4 public sessions on December 2nd, 3rd, 15th, and January 6th. And recognizing that the action steps are a work in progress and will continue to be discussed, but we wanted to at least give you the opportunity to adopt a resolution going into the ARPA discussion, sort of formalizing where you are with your strategic goals. So that's the purpose of this resolution, just to have it available should you decide to adopt it.
Thank you, Carol. Mary Alice, question?
It's I don't know if it's appropriate to say it at this time, but I unfortunately wasn't able to attend the last session. I had some family items to take care of out of town. And as I was reviewing these, I had some questions, but I don't have any questions in terms of the strategic areas or even kind of the strategies. I had more questions about the action items. So I'm wondering if City Council would be open to passing this, but removing section 2. And section 2 goes over the action items specifically. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there for conversation.
And Grace?
I had a lot of things to add that are maybe more discussion in response to Mary Alice. So I just want to say I have things to say on discussion part, but I don't know if there's other questions. I'll let go first. And if not, I'd be happy to make a motion.
Okay. Make a motion to accept the resolution or make a motion regarding what Mary Alice said?
Just getting a motion on the floor so that we can go into discussion.
Okay. Is that, I still need to know, is it approval for no recommendation for what? Not approval?
I would actually move to keep it in committee. Resolution number 2022-01-003R, resolution adopting mayor city council strategic goals for 2022-23.
Seconded.
Who seconded?
Chris.
Okay. Any discussion regarding that? Mary Alice?
So I mean, I think that there is, it would be good for us to pass the strategic areas and the strategy and leave up for conversation the action items at a later date. So I guess I can't make it, there's already a motion on the floor to keep it in committee, but I would like to see that rather than keeping the whole thing in committee. So I'm not going to vote for keeping it in committee.
Okay, Grace?
Thank you. I definitely see that point, and I think that there hasn't been any kind of disagreement about the 4 strategic areas. So I feel like that's pretty well established, and I think we can still go into ARPA discussions knowing those are the 4 areas. And I would be okay, I would feel comfortable passing those 4 strategic areas. My issues with the goals is I agree with Mary Alice that I would love more time to flesh out the action items. And I just have concerns that if we go forward with this now, we're not going to have as much attention to finishing the action items, which is what I feel like are the most meaningful part of it. I think that we just ran out of time just because that's the way of things for especially the #1 priority of community safety and well-being. I don't feel like I gave my full input yet. And I don't know that I feel like I've heard from all the council members about this yet. I feel like we just kind of overall left things at loose ends. And I think that some of the action items may impact some of the strategic goals. Like we eliminated a whole strategic goal area just because we eliminated all the action items. But if we add more action items, we might want to add one back. So I feel okay with the main strategic areas, but I would like to take more time on the action items and the strategic goals of it. I think that we can review them and look and make sure that they are reasonable, smart goals that we can actually try to accomplish and set a target date on accomplishing and milestones along the way. I would also love to review them again with that lens of racial justice, social equity, sustainability, and trying to incorporate our commissions more. So I think that there's more work that we could do on this. And I think that we can still move into ARPA discussions, knowing our 4 areas of priority with or without officially passing this tonight. My thought on keeping it in committee is that it might give us a little more of a push to finalize the whole thing in those 3 weeks times, or if we need to defer again, and we can still move into ARPA knowing those 4 areas, but I would be open to passing those 4 broad areas tonight.
Okay, so Jaya?
So I would like to echo that. I think the strategic areas, everyone's worked really hard on those, and I think that it is reflective of what the council's priorities are. I think that being able to pass that, and in recognition of the many conversations we've had, is important. But I will say that last meeting, even though I really appreciate that we've had 4 meetings, we had really only a few minutes to discuss the first priority. So I do hear that concern of, I honestly don't know that I heard from all of the council members or even some of the staff who were present. So making sure that there's time to, that priority is number 1 for a reason and is deserving of a lot of time and attention. So I would be in favor of giving more time to make sure that we are really thoroughly setting those priorities and setting them in a way that is actionable, that we can actually accomplish in this 2-year period.
Okay, so do we need to amend Grace's motion then? To what Mary Alice was saying, and we instead of.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah. Please.
Grace and Chris, you are the 2 people who, would it be possible to remove your motion and make a motion to pass it excluding section 2 and excluding the strategies? So that's just, that would be something I would suggest if you're open to that.
Grace?
Like I said, I would be open to passing just the 4 main areas, but I would feel more comfortable if we schedule a time to finish the action items. Again, my concern is just that if we pass these now, that it can kind of get pushed to the back burner. And I feel like this is a really important thing, and I want it to be able to have the time and attention that I think it deserves. So I would feel comfortable amending my motion to passing the 4 strategic areas without the action items or the goals, just the 4 areas overall. And I would feel more comfortable if we could try and set some kind of a scheduled time at a COW meeting and special meetings probably to make sure that we follow up on this, kind of like set a deadline for ourselves or a target date on when we want to have that finalized. And I'm not sure when that would be, and I'm open to input on that.
I'm okay with that. Mary Alice, are you okay with that?
Absolutely. I think that's a good idea. I like having deadlines because I work towards deadlines.
Okay, so I'm not sure if this needs to be repeated with the amendments and saying with the amendments made to do without section 2, I guess. Grace?
Can you repeat it, Grace?
Yeah, I'd be happy to formally amend my motion. I was wondering if there was more discussion on when we think that target deadline should be for the rest of it.
Mayor?
We'll have to confer with staff and suggest some dates, but we really can't set a date yet until we know what the staff's time is going to look like. So we can do it, we'll doodle like we've done in the past for other meetings.
Grace?
Thank you. I'm wondering if we could at least set like a far date, knowing that we're obviously going to need to work on schedules, but like the end of March, end of April, like some wide window time frame that we can try and hit, knowing that we have to be flexible, and it will be as soon as reasonably possible, but within a certain time frame. Wondering if you thought like end of March would be reasonable, like 2.5 months to finalize that.
I think we'll set some times. It's hard to say, but yeah, that seems reasonable. But I just need to talk with staff first, just out of respect for staff. So as soon as we know, we'll get back.
Go ahead, Grace.
I was wondering if James could go first in case he had something to add to this.
I was just going to say, I think as council, we should commit to getting it done by the end of March.
And Mary Alice, could you take the chair, please?
And the chair recognizes Sharice.
Okay, I think the point is, with this, for me, my point in the discussion is that it may be the council that does set the deadline, but we can't do anything without staff. It's not like I have a secretary or anybody else does. And we have a strained staff right now. So making that type of commitment, saying it'll be done by a particular date or something like that, will be kind of difficult, considering it's like we just didn't hear that how many people are out with COVID. So I just want to show respect for the fact that staff people are kind of human. And so I can't really say put their deadline on them when we're all working through this all together. So I don't think it's such a great idea to actually say that we're going to put this deadline end of March or end of nothing, because we don't know. Everything is very fluid right now. And I know that the staff they have other things that they're working on, and so it's not a matter of trying to kick the can down the road. It's about just trying to make it so that everyone that has been involved can still be involved, I think. Okay, thank you.
All right, and I relinquish the chair back to Sharice.
Thank you, Mary Alice. And I think Jaya had her hand up.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, I think it's reasonable for us to say that that's the council's goal, but it's staffing permitted. I mean, let's be honest, we cannot do the work that we need to do without the staff. They've already dedicated hours of their time on top of their other responsibilities to this effort. And I think it's absolutely essential that they continue to be part of these conversations. I know in the conversations I've had with staff, I've really valued having the opportunity to hear more directly from their perspective, get their input, especially when we're talking about going back and revisiting the first priority. We absolutely have to have staff in those conversations. So I don't think it's unreasonable for us to say, I hope that we can do this sooner, but saying by the end of March is a goal for the council, staffing permitted, seems understandable to me. But as Sharice just said, we are all feeling the impact of the pandemic in a new and different way. And that's going to increase the burden on all of the staff, even those who are not out sick or out taking care of sick family members.
Okay, Mayor?
Can you clarify these future meetings, would they focus on public safety and well-being only, or on all 4 strategic areas? What's your I just want to make sure we have an understanding of what's expected.
Grace?
I would imagine that it would primarily focus on that public safety one that we ran out of time for. And I think it would also be helpful to look at all of the action items and just have another round of evaluation, making sure that we have reasonable timelines, that they're reasonable, smart goals. And I think it doesn't necessarily have to be all together. It can be people review on their own and send feedback to a person and be ready for a discussion. I think it could look a lot of ways. And in my mind, it would be primarily on strategy 1, and then also taking another sift through all the action items for another final check.
Hey, Jaya?
I think kind of to that point, just to clarify for folks who might be watching who weren't there for those conversations, in the last one, we went in reverse order. So we spent the majority of time on the last of the goals and then worked backwards and ended with strategy number 1. One of the things that our facilitator had mentioned is that generally one then looks and says, okay, these are all of the things that you said you want to get done in a 2-year period. Is that feasible? And because we ran out of time, we have a lot of things that we said we want to get done in 2 years. And I think that is great, right? It's good to be ambitious, but it's also important that we actually get things done. And to ensure that that happens, I think it is important that we set goals that are realistic and actionable, that we can actually achieve in the period of time that we have allocated for these projects. So just to kind of reiterate what Bryce said, I think it does deserve another look through to say, we've said all of these things are important. Do we think that we can get them done in this specific time period?
Okay, Mayor?
And I do appreciate that I think everyone's top priority is public safety and community violence at this point. So we'll talk with staff with that in mind and with the goal of focusing on that particular one to begin with. And then I think perhaps on an individual basis, council members can go through and look at the other areas and the other action steps and evaluate them as far as what you would place as a priority. It's a very, very ambitious list, and we've got a lot on our plate, and we're slammed. I mean, there's no other word for it. We are slammed. Everybody is slammed. And anyone who's part of an organization or a business, I think, understands that. So I appreciate your understanding as well, and we'll, like I said, I'll talk with staff and see what we think we can do and when, and then get back to you.
Okay, anybody else? Grace?
Thank you. So I would like to formally amend my motion and retract holding it in committee and remove to move these to council with recommendation for approval on the consent agenda, with the changes of only including the strategic areas. So just strategic area 1, 2, 3, 4, omitting the strategies and omitting the action items in those last few pages attached. So only the 4 areas, with the understanding that we will set a target of finalizing the rest of it by the end of March, staff and scheduling permitting. It's probably way more information than you needed, but there it is.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion regarding the amendment of the resolution proposal or motion? Okay, Ms. Clark, can you call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin?
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes.
Okay, so that has passed, and let's see. Council input and communication. That's the end of our city business. Council input and communication, anybody? Chris?
Yeah, real quick. Let's see here. So I had 6 things that I found that I've always not liked about the Aaliyah Lewis arrest. The failure to de-escalate, the punch to the back of the head, the knee to the her back, the safety off the rifle, and the couple that are I'm forgetting. If it were up to me, I would have paid Aaliyah $300,000 for her trouble. I think de-escalation is that important, and it's worth it to bring some integrity to our police force. I don't think that it disqualifies Corey Coker from being in charge of our co-responder. I don't think that he deliberately helped a battering at all. I think what disqualifies Corey Coker to be our co-responder leader is that he's a cop. And in this ignorant dreamer's belief, I would really wish that someday we would stop using the police to answer mental health calls. That'll be the last time I ever talk about anybody's public input because I believe it is against the rules of our public input to talk about people's public input. On page 2, first paragraph, it says that we are not allowed to do any problem solving or react to any comments that the public makes during council meetings. So I will never do that again. I really believe that yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. We shouldn't be commenting on people's comments. If you want to talk to us, the public can call us or email us individually for our reaction to your comments. One last thing, I'm getting a lot of comments and constituent replies about when are we going to have discussions where the public can talk about the ARPA money. When will we have that, start those discussions? People are getting anxious. They see the city of Champaign moving their ARPA money out. The Champaign County Board is moving their money out. When is Urbana going to do it? So I just want to say that we need to kind of, I don't know, set a date for that, set a goal for that. Thank you for letting me speak, and that's all.
Okay, Mary Alice.
So it was my understanding, at least from what Diane had said, that the RPC is going to come and give us a plan. So next week. So hopefully we'll have a better picture of what's going on with the ARPA funds next week. I would also like to publicly thank the Urbana officers and the Champaign officers who worked diligently on January 12th to arrest a couple of people who were involved in our unfortunate first murder of the year. And last but not least, I'd like to send my best wishes to the staff who are out with COVID or taking care of people with COVID, and I wish them a quick recovery.
Let's see, anyone else? Grace.
Thank you. Wanted to also just remind the public to, urge you to please take COVID precautions when at all ever possible. And I was wondering if we could also at some point have clarification about what's currently required in Urbana in particular, and maybe with the state as far as mask mandates or what's really in effect right now. I think that would be helpful. I don't really know what the situation is, so I imagine that a lot of the public may not either. And then as far as some of the incidents that have been brought up, I do think that there is an issue because I have seen multiple incidences take place in Urbana that I believe are not appropriate with police, that are misuse of force. And I believe that other observers would and have also opinioned that it's inappropriate. And yet they've still been deemed or treated as within policy. So on a broad sense, I would like to, what I see helpful, and I don't know how or if that's possible in my position as counsel, I would like to have meaningful input on the use of force policy with improvements, like maybe defining what misuse of force even is, and then have that policy and other policies meaningfully and transparently have oversight. And then I'm also looking forward to our UPD de-escalation training, since we did keep that allocation of $35,000. We're almost halfway through the year now. So I look forward to whatever that training might be. And I look forward to also hopefully staff exploring options with Police Training Institute and Dr. Sundiata Chajiwa and some of their experience and resources with that institution. So I hope that that can be one part of this multifaceted system that can get accomplished within this fiscal year. And I think that's all for now. Thank you.
Okay, James.
Yeah, I too would like to wish our staff a speedy recovery. When I was in our meeting last week, I didn't realize I was about to get my positive test back that evening. I went through an experience with COVID last week. Fortunately, mine was mild, but if I was doing the majority of my work in person, I would not have been able to perform my job for the majority of last week because of COVID, much like if I had had a severe cold. So I urge everyone to take precautions. I was not in a place the 3 or 4 days before I turned positive where I felt like I was unsafe. I was constantly masking. I was keeping my distance from people, but nevertheless, this Omicron variant gets through. I was also vaccinated and boosted. So be careful out there. And for those of our staff who are working through this, both the illness and the implications it does for work and family, I hope you have a speedy recovery.
Okay, Mayor.
Yes, just wanted to repeat again, we will be kicking off the ARPA process next week, public, and we will be hearing and public engagement is part of that process within the next few weeks through March and April. Most people may not know, but when the final rule for use of the funds was just issued the first, I think, January 6th. And there were significant changes between the interim rule that everyone else has been using to date and the final rule. Significant more flexibility in use of the funds and the types of uses that are eligible and the amounts allocated to cities for various uses. So in a way, it was actually really good that we waited until this point to get started, because now we are operating under the final rule and we know the full breadth of and flexibility that we have to work with. And secondly, there's been a great deal of work that has gone on behind the scenes by the Regional Planning Commission in looking at past plans, public input, all the input we've received to date on the comp plan, summarizing all that. So the speed with which we move through this process to a large extent depends on the council and how quickly you want to go. So, and that'll be explained further next week as well. So it's underway and we're being very thoughtful and careful about this. And we now have just now recently received the final rules that govern the use of this money. And what you'll find in your packet next week is an overview of the final rule from the U.S. Treasury Department. It's about 45 pages long, and it will provide very good background information for you and for the public to begin this discussion. So we've been working hard. We've been working hard to prepare for this.
Mayor, well, I know your time is almost up, but the other question that Grace had, I think too, was about what the Department of Health recommends now. You usually keep up on that really well. I was wondering if you could give some further, you usually have some information about that. And I was just wondering if you could, my understanding is that it's still to mask up and to get boosted.
The basic advice hasn't changed, which is to get vaccinated, to get boosted if you are eligible, to wear a mask indoors, to wear a mask outdoors if you feel the need. At the city building, we require masking indoors, in the hallways or any public areas or in any person-to-person encounters. If you're in your office by yourself, you do not need to wear a mask. We just ordered a large supply of KN95 masks to supply to all employees to wear on a daily basis. I believe it was either a 30 or 60-day supply. I don't remember, but we've upgraded the quality of the masks that we're now supplying to employees. But I've been on many calls, and I'll tell you, the level of confusion has increased exponentially as CDC guidance has changed. And, you know, we went from 10-day quarantine to 5-day quarantine, and it's, everyone is confused. I would say there's general confusion, but we are abiding by the current CDC guidelines as far as isolation, quarantine, and exposures.
Okay, thank you. Chandra, you had your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I attended the MLK Day celebration yesterday at Krannert, And it was very great, and I appreciate the city joining in with the rest of the county to do the proclamation. And I just want to sort of make sure that proclamation isn't, just fluff, and that we're actually doing the work and continuing the legacy of MLK, and making sure that we're approaching things in our city with racial equity and justice in mind. I just wanted to say thank you to the city for working that.
Are there any more, is there any more input or communication that needs to be? Okay, well, with that in mind, this meeting is adjourned. Our business is taken care of. Thank you.